But there were also tears of rage. She strongly suspected that she'd been jumped into the action by the council. They'd met secretly and decided not to tell her that the warrant had been dispatched to Fotheringhay. That's why she tore strips off her ministers and Secretary William Davison in particular, who'd actually dispatched the warrant. He was imprisoned, fined, and even threatened with hanging. But finally, they were crocodile tears as well. By exaggerating her grief and scapegoating Davison, Elizabeth was trying to deflect responsibility from where it really and finally lay, with her.
The news of Mary's execution exploded across the Catholic world. It gave Philip of Spain the excuse he needed to declare war on the heretic Queen. Philip ordered the Duke of Parma to prepare an army in the Netherlands for the invasion of England. The Armada would sail from Spain to collect Parma's force and land them on the English coast. Philip's deadly intentions were no secret. Reluctantly, Elizabeth ordered that the English fleet be readied for the threat. Even now, she hoped to avoid war. She tried negotiating with Parma as the Armada set sail. But there was no mood for compromise amongst her Catholic opponents.
She's an incestuous bastard, begotten and born in sin of an infamous courtesan. Cardinal William Allen, June 1588.
English lookouts scoured the horizon for enemy sails. They sighted them on July the 19th. The Spanish did not really expect to be challenged on their voyage up the Channel. The English fleet was half the size of the Armada, but what they lacked in numbers, they made up for in design.
The English ships were much smaller than the Spanish ships. The Spanish ships tended to have large forecastles and large aftercastles, which were fortified areas on the ship where they could house men when they engaged in battle, men who could then board other ships. But as the rigs were fairly small, in fact too small really for powering the ships along, it meant that the Spanish ships were largely only of use in trade and sailing, in following the routes between Spain and the Americas, rather than in tactical fighting within the English Channel. And I think that is where the English ships scored, because they were relatively smaller and therefore more manoeuvrable and had the tactical advantage.
The English still weren't ready to engage the Spanish fleet head-on. Sir Francis Drake, now promoted to Vice Admiral, favoured skirmishing tactics. As the Armada sailed up the Channel, there was a scatter of vicious dogfights. Elizabeth went on a morale-boosting visit to her troops on land. Finally, she had found a rhetorical way of reconciling the paradox of being a woman and being a leader in war.
I am come amongst you not for my recreation and disport, but being resolved in the midst and heat of the battle, to live or die amongst you all, to lay down for God and for my kingdom and for my people, my honor and my blood, even in the dust. I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and think foul scorn that Spain or any prince of Europe should dare to invade the borders of my realm, to which, rather than any dishonor shall grow by me, I myself will take up arms.
But Elizabeth did not need to take up arms herself. The English had a secret weapon. They called it the Hell Burner. They packed 5 ships with pitch and timber, set fire to them, and put them adrift amongst the Spanish galleons. There was panic. Many of the Spanish ships upped anchor and fled. and were scattered by the wind.
Incredibly, Medina Sidonia, the Spanish admiral, managed to reunite his scattered ships. They even resumed their powerful crescent formation. Then, off Gravelines, on the coast of the Netherlands, the two fleets, for the first time, came into battle at close quarters. Each side used its favourite tactics. The Spaniards tried to board, the English brought their heavy guns into play at close quarters. And it was the English guns that won the day. They killed thousands of Spaniards, and they did terrible damage to the structure of the Spanish ships, though only a handful actually went down.
The winds and the weather now finished what the English fleet had begun. Many of the Spanish ships were wrecked off the coasts of the British Isles as they tried to find their way home. The defeat of the Armada was England's and Elizabeth's finest hour. Little wonder that she had this portrait painted as a symbolic memorial. Elizabeth was now mistress of the seven seas, as well as of her own people.
Elizabeth had entered the war against Spain with a deep sense of foreboding, but she'd emerged triumphant. Above all, she'd shown that a woman could be an inspirational leader in war as well as in peace. Of course, the weather had played its part in the victory over the Armada. God's winds blew and they were scattered, as it said on the back of the commemorative medal. But this fact does nothing to diminish the extent of the English victory or the scale of Spain's defeat and humiliation. At the beginning of Elizabeth's reign, the heralds had proclaimed that she was empress from the Orkney Isles to the Pyrenean Mountains. Then the claim to English overlordship of the seas was empty bombast. With the defeat of the Armada, it became sober reality. It was an astonishing achievement. The only problem now was living up to it.